Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a really tough call and you just froze? You know all the facts, you've weighed the pros and cons, but you're just stuck? Well, today, we're going to dive into a virtue that's built for exactly those moments, prudence. And we're going to look at it through the lens of a super high-stakes, hypothetical medical case that puts this very skill to the ultimate test. Okay, let's jump right in. All right, so picture this. We're in an emergency department. The pressure is just immense, and every single decision could mean the difference between life and death. This is a place where doctors and nurses have to think on their feet and act fast, often without all the information they wish they had. So, our hypothetical case revolves around a 52-year-old woman. She's been rushed to the hospital because she suddenly started having extreme trouble breathing. By the time she arrives, her condition is absolutely critical. She is in full cardio-pulmonary arrest. That means her heart has completely stopped. The medical team, of course, immediately jumps into action. They intubate her, they start CPR. It is an all-hands-on-deck, intense effort. And it works. They manage to revive her, and for a second, you can just feel the relief wash over that room. But that feeling doesn't last long. Just 30 minutes later, it happens again. Her heart stops for a second time, and the team is thrown right back into that same life-or-death struggle. Okay, so now imagine this. They've been doing CPR for another solid hour, with absolutely no change, no signs of improvement. And this is where the crisis shifts. The frantic physical effort to save her life has hit a wall. And now it's replaced by this heavy, really difficult ethical decision. This quote really gets to the heart of the new problem. The doctors wanted to give up, but felt unsure whether this was the right thing to do or not. Think about that. They are physically and emotionally drained. They've tried everything in the playbook, but they are totally paralyzed by uncertainty. Their dilemma is actually a perfect example of a question we all face, right? Maybe the stakes aren't always so high, but we've all been there. When you're backed into a corner and the right path isn't obvious, how do you find the certainty to know that your next step is the right one? And this gets us to a really fundamental human challenge. That gap between what we know in theory and what we can actually do in practice, especially when we're stressed out, tired, or under a ton of pressure. This slide really breaks it down. See, on the left, you have knowledge, knowing all the life-saving procedures, understanding the ethical principles. That's the textbook stuff. But then on the right, you have application, knowing when to use that knowledge and how to apply it to a messy, unique, real-world situation. And that's a whole different ballgame. So, what's the bridge over that gap? Well, the answer we're exploring today is the virtue of prudence. And it's so important to think of this not just as some abstract idea, but as a practical, trainable skill for making good judgments. Now, a lot of us hear prudence and we just think being cautious, but it's so much more than that. The definition here is a certain ease in taking into consideration all the factors that enter into any particular moral decision. It's about developing an ability to see the entire chessboard calmly and clearly, even when everything is chaotic. So what does a prudent person actually do in a crisis like the one in Eddie-R? Well, first off, they don't panic. They stay calm enough to weigh all the different factors and form a clear judgment. This lets them arrive at something called moral certitude, which isn't just a hunch, it's a deep conviction. And from that conviction, they can then act with real courage and consistency. Now, this all sounds pretty good, right? But is it something you're just born with? No, not at all, and that's the whole point. Prudence isn't some gift you either have or you don't. It's a habit. It's a skill you can actually forge through practice. So, how do you build this skill? Well, it really comes down to two things. Step one is study. That means learning the principles, reading, taking a class, finding wise mentors. But just knowing stuff isn't enough. Step two is experience. You have to get out there and apply what you've learned in the real world, maybe starting with smaller decisions. And this is the key, you have to reflect on how it went. It's that cycle of acting and then reflecting that really builds true judgment. And I love this quote because it gives us a really powerful way to think about the end goal. Prudence is the good habit that allows one to do good actions spontaneously, promptly, easily, and joyfully. You see that? It suggests that this isn't about being burdened by hard choices. It's about building an inner compass that makes doing the right thing feel more natural, more decisive, and maybe even joyful. So that leaves us with a final question to kind of chew on. In our own lives, with our own complex decisions waiting for us at work or at home,
How can we start to intentionally build that cycle of study and experience to cultivate that calm, courageous judgment that defines prudence?